Introducing LT Defense Tactical Gear, your ultimate solution for top-notch protection and performance in the field. Our armor bundles provide unmatched safety and comfort, while our battle belts and holsters ensure quick and easy access to your gear. Stay prepared for any situation with our high-quality medical supplies, designed to keep you ready for action at all times. Looking to enhance your skills? Our firearms training programs will take your proficiency to the next level. Trust LT Defense for all your tactical gear needs and gear up for success on the battlefield.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Think of all that time. Every wait in the winter. All those hours no one else. Think of all that time. Think of every sacrifice in the summer. Every wait in the mornings on the levee. Late nights in the film room. Bus rides to playoff games. Every bump in the road. Every moment of ecstasy. Every moment of doubt. Years wondering. Is it all worth it? It's all led to this. Man, I got this money. It's a 60-minute drive for a 60-minute game. After all the miles we've traveled, we're almost there. After all the hours we've worked, one more can make us legends. After all that time, this is our time.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Good knowing exactly where to go with the football.
Hello, and what is up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice, helping teach veterans how to podcast, and most importantly, letting veterans' voices be heard. So I am back. So with at least Inside the Hoosier Mind, it's probably going to be a little bit more sporadic with some of the episodes. It is the off season, at least for football. And as much as I like basketball, I don't follow the NBA that well or that much. And I really haven't been able to keep up with college basketball so far. So I will try to do my best on that. I'll still have episodes sporadically kind of here and throughout as we get more news and whatnot. If you can't tell, my background is a little bit different. Don't have my usual background up. I'm getting ready to actually leave here shortly to go help a family friend with something. But I still wanted to do a show, and I still wanted to talk about all the craziness that is the free agency market and whatnot for the NFL, since free agency kicked off this month. And some big names that haven't signed yet. One of them in particular that has already finally started to get some heat. Because he just hasn't made a decision, even though it's all but kind of guaranteed at least 3 places of where he's going to go. It's just a matter of will he sign the paperwork or not, but he likes the attention. And that is a gentleman by the name of Aaron Rodgers, but we will get into that here in a little bit. I'm not going to go over every single free agency signing that has happened so far. I am going to go over some of the big ones, kind of what I think. Obviously, there's going to be some old faces and new places this coming season, and some of the ones that I think are the most interesting and what I think is going to overall do for some of these teams. If I think some of them are good or not, or if some of them I feel like, that might be a little bit of a reach. You're just trying to kind of plug and play with free agency and whatnot. But with all that being said, let's get into some of the bigger signings that have taken place over the last few weeks, and really even at the beginning of the month. So probably some of the biggest ones, the Commanders released 2-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who ended up reaching an agreement the Vikings on a 3-year, $60 million deal to be able to go through on that, which is big for Minnesota. Honestly, last year their defense did a lot better than what I thought they were going to do, especially not having Danielle Hunter. He actually ended up getting let go. He ended up going to the Houston Texans and performing extremely well. So I felt like Minnesota has been kind of missing some of those veteran leadership and that defensive presence and that pass rush to be able to get after a quarterback. The Vikings also released Garrett Bradbury just yesterday. He just signed today with the New England Patriots. So the Patriots kind of re-solidified their offensive line. The Vikings feel like they've kind of re-solidified theirs. I believe they ended up signing a free agent as well in order to do that. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, though. The Giants, this is one to me that I felt was kind of big. They end up actually signing former Dolphin safety Javon Holland to a 3-year, $45 million guarantee. 3-year, $45 million deal worth up to almost $47 million and includes $30 million guaranteed. To me, that's pretty big for the Giants purely because their defense really has been about their only bright spot of the entire last probably 5-6 years has been the defense. It's like they've spent a ton of money on defense. Now, offensively, they haven't spent a whole lot of money since Kenny Golladay, and Kenny Golladay absolutely robbed them of millions of dollars and really only ended up playing, I believe, a couple of games and not that many snaps as far as playing offensively with the Giants. So that to me was kind of one of those more under the radar big signings that it kind of made headlines, but it wasn't one of those I don't think a whole lot of people are turning their heads. But to me personally, that was a pretty big move for them to do. The Bills also signed former 49ers pass rusher Joey Bosa to a 1-year, $12.5 million deal with $12 million of that guaranteed and a max value of almost $15.5 million as well. So big signing for the Bills, especially considering they released Von Miller. So I know some people weren't huge fans of that because you go from an older proven veteran in Von Miller who had a little bit of injury history over the last couple of years to another guy who, again, proven but has a lot of injury history, and you basically move on to kind of the same thing. But when healthy, Joey Bosa is one of the best current pass rushers that you could get. They get him on a fairly cheap deal, kind of a 1-year prove it. Usually by his historical standards, whenever that happens, that's something that usually benefits pretty well because those guys are usually playing to get another contract type of deal. So it's kind of a win-win for the Bills. They get a cheap replacement that if he's healthy and productive, it's a win-win for him. And I feel like Buffalo is trying to retool to, again, make a potential run, especially while they have Josh Allen, coming off of an MVP season. He's finally got the MVP, which is something that I felt he kind of needed to get off of his back. Now, the other thing he needs to do, he still needs to be able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. He's been able to beat him in the regular season. Playoffs has been a completely different story, though. So sticking in the AFC East, the Jets also signed quarterback Justin Fields to a 2-year, $40 million deal with $30 million of that guaranteed, and includes a $15 million signing bonus and a $5 million base salary in 2025. They officially cut ties with Aaron Rodgers. So it's funny when you look at the math of how much he's going to cost them next season on top of Aaron Rodgers' deal, because Aaron Rodgers still has 2 seasons that they're going to pay for. They're going to have $57 million in dead cap space for quarterbacks that either may or may not even be on the roster next year, which is absolutely insane. For Justin, I'm going to be honest. I'm excited because now he gets another opportunity to start and to prove that he is still an NFL level quarterback. However, I am also disappointed because he has to go to the Jets. And for anybody who knows, the Jets have not historically been great when it comes to setting up their quarterbacks for success. Now he's coming into a pretty stacked and pretty talented Jets roster. He's got Brees Hall, he's got Braylon Allen in the backfield for his running backs. He's got Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. They do still have Alan Lazard. Now, all things considered, he did pretty well with Aaron, and he actually performed pretty well last year. The biggest question, though, is that offensive line. It was an issue with Aaron. It's going to be an issue for Justin, and that was an issue that he had in Chicago. Now, the benefit is Justin is more athletic. He's able to run and scramble out of the pocket a lot more. Maybe they're able to make it work, and he has a little bit more offensive weapons to work with. So maybe that could potentially push them over the edge as far as maybe returning back to the playoffs for the first time in 15 years, since they haven't been since like 2010. But that'll yet to be seen as we come into the season. They've actually made a lot of moves on defense more than they have on offense. Now, again, none of the defensive moves are really, I would call, big names. And same, honestly, with the offense. They've kind of signed Josh Myers as the center that they signed. It's about the only other big name that I can think of besides Justin. So they really haven't done much offensively to help him other than releasing Devontae and releasing Aaron. So I'm not really enthusiastic on the Jets, but again, it's still kind of early in free agency. We don't know what they're going to do in the draft either. And we won't know until honestly draft night happens and it comes and goes. So we will see. Moving on to the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who kind of made two big splashes. They did sign DeAndre Hopkins to a 1-year, $5 million contract, which to me, it's kind of one of those, yeah, they're going to get Lamar another wide receiver, but he's older. He does have a little bit left in the tank, but he's not the star that he once was. And I don't really trust him. And I don't know how well he's going to fare with having to basically block for Lamar. Now, I know Lamar has gotten better when it comes to being a pocket passer, but primarily Lamar is still a running quarterback, and a lot of those wide receivers are going to have to block for him. So it'll be interesting to see how he is paired with Zay Flowers if they're able to make that combination work. And should anything happen to Lamar, they also signed former Cowboys backup quarterback Cooper Rush to a 2-year, $12 million contract as well. Now, sticking in the AFC and sticking with the AFC North, there's their counterpart team. The Bengals have actually been fairly active in free agency, mainly signing their own players. So they did sign Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both to massive contracts just yesterday. Jamar Chase signed a 4-year, $161 million extension, and T. Higgins finally gets his big contract from them. He had been franchise tag the last 2 seasons. He was re-signed to a 4-year, $115 million deal as well. And they were also able to re-sign Mike Gesicki, their tight end, a 3-year and a $25.5 million contract, which that's great because now Joe Burrow has weapons to throw to, but he had those weapons already. The problem with the Bengals is 2 things. Their offensive line definitely needs help, and that needs shored up. And the bad part with Jamar, with T all taking this money, you're now losing that flexibility to potentially sign a free agent offensive lineman to help keep Joe Burrow up because he was sacked a lot. He was hurried up a lot. Now, again, he had an MVP number season, but they were an average team and they ended up missing the playoffs. So that's probably going to come back to bite them. The other thing that's really going to hurt them, then that honestly hurt them last year and kept them from the playoffs as well, is their defense. They let Trey Hendrickson go. He is still technically a free agent. I heard reports that they are talking to him to try to re-sign him to a contract. But honestly, they might be hurt with that because their other team in the AFC North, the Browns, re-signed Myles Garrett to a massive contract that is an average of about $40 million a year, the highest for a non-quarterback position. And I'm not saying Trey is going to try to demand that type of money, but he also has the most sacks over the last 4 years out of anybody in the NFL. So he's definitely put up the production, and he's been one of the few bright spots for that Bengals defense. Now, they do get the defensive coordinator from Notre Dame, Al Golden, which is great, but he is going to have an extremely important and pivotal position for the Bengals to potentially have success. Is what can he do with that defense? Can he make it viable? And can he potentially bring the Bengals back to a fairly decent point of, being contenders? And can the Bengals not have to score like 41 points And can they not give up 42 points to potentially cost them game by game and week by week basis? So we'll see. I'm not overly enthusiastic about it. Again, happy for Joe Burrow. He keeps all of his weapons and he's going to be in a good spot offensively. But again, offensive line needs a lot of work and the defense needs a lot of work. How do they manage that financially? Because typically and historically, the Bengals have not been known for spending a lot of money. So this is kind of off the wall for them. Historically compared to what they normally do. The Browns really haven't done a whole lot in free agency. Like I said, they did sign Myles Garrett to a 4-year extension that includes $123 million guaranteed. They did trade for cornerback Kenny Pickett from the Eagles in exchange for their quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 5th-round pick. The Steelers have actually been fairly active in free agency, which is, again, not something we've usually seen from them over the past few years. They signed a few big names. One in particular, they did trade for DK Metcalf and sign him to a 4-year, $132 million extension, as well as they did get backup quarterback Mason Rudolph back. So for realistic purposes, he's about their only starting quarterback that they have on their roster at the current moment, as well as they were able to sign Darius Slay, former Eagles cornerback who just won the Super Bowl with them, to a 1-year, $10 million guaranteed, and that's all fully guaranteed, as well as safety Juan Thornhill. I like what Pittsburgh has done. The only two issues I have with Pittsburgh, you already had a very diva-esque wide receiver in George Pickens, who is known for calling out a lot of things, voicing his frustration with the media, not really talking with the team. So you already have George Pickens, who kind of has a little bit of issues on the field and off the field when it comes to that. Now, everything else, as far as I know, George Pickens is solid. You get DK, who is kind of in the same boat, had a little bit of issues with Seattle, actually said that he wanted to get traded to a warm place. I don't know Pittsburgh to be that much warmer than Seattle a whole lot of times, so I don't think Seattle took that much into consideration. And then to boot, you don't have anybody to throw to. And this is where kind of the Aaron Rodgers thing starts, but again, I'll dive into that here in a little bit. With Aaron Rodgers, the thing that really bugs me is the fact that you have 3 teams for sure that are interested in you and that you would start for. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who obviously need a quarterback. They moved off of Russ. They moved off of Justin. They have Mason Rudolph as basically their only option. You're coming into an above-average offensive line. You have 2 solid wide receivers. You actually have a solid tight end and Pat Freiermuth to throw to. Now, running back wise, a little bit of a question. They did let Najee Harris walk in free agency, and he ended up signing with the Chargers. And you have a fairly competent defense, and you have a guy that has been there and is well established for many, many years. The issue with that is, to me, I think Aaron wants to be able to come in and absolutely run everything that he wants the way that he wants to run it, and Mike Tomlin is absolutely not going to do that. Now, if there's a coach that could potentially handle it the best, it's Mike Tomlin. And we know that because of the drama that we had with Le'Veon Bell, the drama that we had with Antonio Brown. If there is a coach that can handle a diva wide receiver or a diva personality that for many other places may or may not be a toxicity, it's definitely Mike Tomlin. And I think he could potentially handle Rodgers. I don't think Rodgers could handle him, to be 100% honest when it comes to that. But that's at least the Pittsburgh side. And again, I'll dive more into Rodgers throughout the rest of the show. We'll move on and we'll continue on to the AFC, then we'll move on to the NFC after the break. So Texans have made a little bit of moves. Most of it has been more on the defensive side, not a really lot of big names, other than they did trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson from the Eagles, a safety, and they ended up exchanging Kenyon Green in that trade. So not only 2 signings that have been interesting. One I feel like is very good. The other one I feel not so much. The Colts did sign Shavarius Ward to a 3-year deal up to $60 million with $35 million guaranteed and a $20 million signing bonus, which is great. They definitely needed that defensive back. They needed somebody young and proven that could come in and be a defensive leader for the team. The thing they did offensively that I have a lot of questions about, and I feel like a lot of Colts fans have questions on, is they did sign quarterback Daniel Jones to a 1-year, $14 million deal with $13.15 million fully guaranteed, with a $6 million signing bonus. It's a $7.15 million base salary for this season, and a max value of $17.7 million. Here's the problem I have with this is the Colts. I don't think the Colts already know what to do with Anthony Richardson. I think it's one of those, he's still young. He still has to prove himself. Last year was rough for him. He gets hurt pretty consistently. He had the quitting in the middle of the game type of moment, which again, I understand because it was rough. He's getting hit. The game was close. And I think he was hurt and he was tired. Now, obviously, I think he's learned from that point moving forward. It's not what you do in football at any level, whether it's Pee Wee, high school, middle school, collegiate, or NFL. You never voluntarily give up your spot, because if you do, you may never get that spot back, because a lot of teams preach next man up mentality. And there may be somebody behind you that says, I want to be that person next, and I'm not going to give up the spot once I get it. I think for this, Daniel Jones is that, I'm not going to say perfect kind of push, but I do think for Daniel Jones to be there, I think, and I'm saying this on March 18th at 5:17 p.m. Eastern time, I think what's going to happen is Daniel Jones is going to come in. I think he's going to have a fairly solid camp. And then I think the reports are going to come out, oh, Daniel Jones looks sharp. Anthony Richardson is struggling in camp. And then I think the rumors and the whispers and the push for Daniel Jones to potentially start is going to get thrown out there. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if Shane Steichen is going to potentially prevent that. And who knows? I'm hoping throughout this offseason that Anthony Richardson takes that as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to really get his head in the game. This is his first year under his belt. Maybe now he can see things a little bit differently. Because let's be realistic, his rookie year, he started 3 games, got hurt, and then he was out for the rest of the season. So last year was his rookie year, essentially, to really learn. And typically whenever you look at a quarterback, from year 2 to year 3 is where you really see the difference in the development and the growth of a player. So we will find out if Anthony Richardson truly is going to be the guy or not in Indianapolis, or if Daniel Jones may or may not get to be the guy per se. Jaguars really haven't they have made moves, but they haven't really made anything too big or too crazy that I would, turn my head at, or anything crazy like that. The Titans, kind of the same way. They really haven't signed anybody big. Their biggest issue is going to be, who do they get in the draft? As far as their draft position and whatnot, do they try to go after a quarterback? Do they get Travis Hunter? Who do the Titans get? Now the Broncos have actually been fairly active in free agency. They signed a former Jaguar in tight end Evan Ingram. They end up getting Dre Greenlaw from the 49ers on a 3-year deal. And they also get safety Talanoa Hufanga. Hope I enunciated that correctly. If I didn't, please tell me. But the Broncos kind of shoring up on former 49ers who were definitely stars, a little bit of injury histories. But when they're on the field and they're healthy, they're absolutely solid. Now the Chiefs have been somewhat active. They did sign quarterback Gardner Minshew to back up Patrick Mahomes. They re-signed Kareem Hunt. They keep Marquise Hollywood Brown. They re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster. Now they did trade guard Joe Thuney to Da Bears, which ends up kind of shoring up Da Bears' offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see how Kansas City kind of retools themselves, especially after that Super Bowl, because that Super Bowl was an absolute mess, and that was kind of a smack in their face. They haven't really been embarrassed like that since the Tampa Bay Super Bowl. In all honesty, I would call this Eagles Super Bowl loss more embarrassing than the Tampa Bay Super Bowl loss, because at least in the Tampa Bay, you saw Patrick kind of running around for his life and he was trying. And this one, it seemed like a lot of players kind of quit more than anything. And I don't know if that was they were more disappointed or what, but it was an ugly Super Bowl. But to finish up and round out the AFC real quick before we go to commercial break, the Raiders end up getting Geno Smith in a trade with the Seahawks. They signed running back Raheem Mostert. They sign Max Crosby to an extension, and they do sign safety Jeremy Chin, which for anybody who kind of keeps up with football all around, Jeremy Chin was on the Panthers as a safety and was actually pretty solid. I'm really surprised they let him walk. I don't know if that was more of a value deal or maybe a health deal. But again, one of those when healthy, absolutely solid. And actually, if I remember correctly, I think he was on Washington last year. If I remember, he was on Washington last year. They traded him to Washington. That's right. So kind of surprised Washington even let him walk too. So that's a little bit of a surprise. But to finish out the AFC, the Chargers also signed Najee Harris to a 1-year, $5.25 million guarantee, fully guaranteed deal. he actually gets to come back to coach Harbaugh, who tried to recruit him initially while Harbaugh was at Michigan, before he actually ended up signing with the Crimson Tide of Alabama. They re-signed Jalen Reagor. Don't know why they would do that. They also bring back former wide receiver Mike Williams, comes back to them after a little bit of a journey from the Jets and the Steelers. They also signed guard Mekhi Becton, who just won the Super Bowl with the Eagles, a former Jets starter. He gets a 2-year, $20 million deal. They re-signed Khalil Mack. That one was probably one of the most surprising because there's a lot of talks that they were going to let him go. And there's actually talks he wanted to return to Chicago. So I didn't know if that was going to be a sign and trade type deal or if they were just going to sign him and potentially move on. But apparently not anyway. And I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate Joel. I appreciate Amber from Into the Weeds podcast. If you want anything kind of weird, kooky, spooky, anything like that, definitely check them out. Amber and Laura actually just joined me on another podcast that I'm doing about true crime, murder, everything like that. And they were both absolutely fantastic. Hopefully, if scheduling and everything works out, Amber's going to be on with me in a couple weeks again to talk about America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes. But I'm not going to dive super deep into that here on the sports show. But we will take one quick commercial break. It'll be a little bit of a short break because, again, I'm a little bit crunched on time here. But when we come back, we will talk a little bit quickly about the NFC side, and we'll go from there.
Tune in to Clado's Cacophony of Sound every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern on Military Broadcast Radio at mbradio.us or on Twitch at DJ_Clado. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
All right. Welcome back in, everyone, to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice, helping teach veterans how to podcast, and most importantly, letting veterans' voices be heard. So we are back to talk some of the NFL free agency moves that has happened, mainly because there's not a whole lot going on other than free agency because season doesn't start for a while. But I'm trying to highlight some of the big moves that have happened with some of the teams. Like I said, I'm not going through every single signing. I am trying to go through some of the bigger signings that have happened that I think might be impactful for teams. So I just did the AFC. Now we're going to do the NFC real quick. Starting with Dallas. Dallas almost never does anything in free agency anyway. They did sign Javonte Williams, kind of former standout running back for the Broncos, to a 1-year, $3 million deal. They definitely needed to upgrade the running back room, especially. And don't get me wrong, Rico Dowdle had actually a pretty good season last year for Dallas, but they 100% needed to upgrade that. They re-signed Dante Fowler, who they had 2 years ago. He spent 1 year in Washington with former defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who became the head coach of Washington and now is back. They did sign kind of two bigger, I guess, picks. They signed Solomon Thomas, who was formerly with the Jets. And if you would have told me that they did that, like 6-7 years ago, that would probably be a big pick. But he's 33. He's probably coming to the end, especially as a defensive lineman. I don't know how long he's going to be with Dallas with that point. He is signed to a 2-year contract, but we'll see. They also signed linebacker. They actually get a trade in the Titans for Kenneth Murray. They get a 7th-round pick, and the Titans get a 6th-round pick from Dallas in exchange for him. He's like 32. Don't know how long he's going to be there, but nothing Dallas has really done has kind of really surprised me. The Giants, kind of in the same boat. They have signed a ton of people on the defensive side. Like I mentioned, they signed Javon Holland. They signed Chauncey Golston, which isn't necessarily bad, but they haven't really done much offensively. They did re-sign Darius Slayton, who is a solid wide receiver for him. He's been a solid wide receiver for the Giants for a while, but again, nothing super crazy that I would kind of hang my hat on. The Giants are another place that Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers both been linked to. Russell Wilson actually had an interview with them and left without a deal. For me, if either one of them go to the Giants, and I heard this on my way actually home, I heard theory that if the Giants potentially draft someone like Shedeur with the 3rd pick, do they try to get Russ in and maybe try to mentor him, since that's probably going to be his comp as far as being an athletic mobile quarterback, really rolling out, scrambling, and making plays. And we know when he was in his prime, that's what Russ was known for. I have a little bit of hesitancy with that as Russ has now gotten older. He still tries to do that, but you can tell Father Time has finally caught up with Russ, and it's a little bit harder for him to do that. And to me, that's one of those that's hard to teach when you're used to kind of doing it on your own. To me, that's the epitome of a player, kind of like how Michael Jordan was. He was really good at playing with people, but he was bad at trying to pick talent because it's hard to see someone and say this person is just as good as I was, and that may not actually be the case or not. So, not super impressed by that. I don't know how either Russ or Aaron would do if they went to the Giants. Again, the offensive line is a massive issue, and I don't see it getting any better. Um, the Eagles have actually done pretty well at trying to re-sign a lot of their own homegrown players. They have signed a few players to kind of supplement some of the pieces that they lost. They did sign Saquon Barkley to a 2-year extension. They restructured Lane Johnson to kind of help with his cap hits and whatnot. They did get Kenyon Green at guard. They re-signed linebacker Zach Bond and Adoree Jackson. Washington also kind of fairly active, a little bit better is again signing kind of a lot of the players that they had before. They did get Deebo Samuel in a trade with the 49ers. They re-signed Zach Ertz, which is big. They did get offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil from the Texans for exchange for quite a bit of picks. But that kind of helps reshore up that offensive line, which they definitely needed. And again, all honesty, they just re-signed a ton of their players. They did sign Javon Kinlaw, who's kind of a high draft pick not that long ago, which is kind of big. So again, kind of reshoring up that defensive line. Moving on to the Bears. The Bears have actually been pretty solid in getting picks and getting free agents that I think will fit well into what they already have. They get offensive guard Jonah Jackson from the Rams. They get Joe Tooney from the Chiefs. And they get center Drew Dahlman in free agency from the Falcons, as well as Grady Jarrett, defensive tackles from the Falcons as well. Again, not upset by this. Some of those guys are a little bit older, so I don't know how much they have left in the tank, but it does show that already with Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. And again, I don't know if it's more Ryan or if it's Ben, but it does show they really are trying to keep their investment in Caleb Williams solid and that they're trying to make that work. So hats off to them for doing that. The Lions also kind of quiet in free agency, nothing too crazy. They did re-sign Marcus Davenport, Tim Patrick, who was already on the Lions. So nothing too crazy from them as far as big names. The Green Bay Packers, also the same. They really haven't done much other than kind of re-signing people that already worked with them before. But for the most part, Green Bay has been quiet in free agency. The Vikings have definitely been very active in that, mainly on the defensive side, when I think offensively is where they might need a little bit more help. They did re-sign Aaron Jones. They signed a backup for him and Jordan Mason from the 49ers. They get Will Fries for their guard. They get Ryan Kelly from the Colts. Will Fries is also a former Colt as well. And then, of course, they signed Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. They re-signed Byron Murphy. They get Jeff Okudah, former first-round pick from the Lions, if I remember correctly, who got traded to the Falcons and then released. They get Isaiah Rodgers from the Eagles. And then, of course, they're actually able to re-sign Harrison Smith for his 14th season. He's been with Minnesota the entire time, and they were able to keep him going. The Falcons, another team, also kind of quiet. I guess their biggest signing really that they re-signed is Leonard Floyd. Kind of gives them an edge rusher that they've really been missing for a long, long time. And something that they've had issues with for a long time is that defensive side. Carolina, also kind of the same, not really a whole lot as far as active in free agency. They did get Trevon Moehrig from the Raiders. He's a safety. Again, another one of those kind of under the radar. I think it's a solid pick because, having been a Cowboys fan at one point, that was something they really needed was Trevon and Javon both. And I think both were actually real close to the same draft, if not in the same draft, and Dallas skipped on both of them. But a solid deal for Carolina to end up getting him. The Saints, kind of the same thing. They did sign Justin Reed, the safety, to a 3-year, $31.5 million deal, which is big. They were able to re-sign Cam Jordan and Chase Young both, so they do at least have 2 edge rushers to work with. And they get Devon Godchaux from the Patriots, a former LSU standout, coming back home to New Orleans to play for the Saints. Buccaneers, a little bit active. They get re-signed. They do get edge rusher Hassan Reddick on a 1-year deal. They were able to re-sign Levante David, as well as Anthony Walker, kind of big. And then for the Cardinals, they did sign edge rusher Josh Sweat from the Eagles for a fairly team-friendly deal. And then they get quarterback Jacoby Brissett to back up Kyler Murray. Other than that, kind of more, just kind of backup pieces more than anything. The Rams, fairly active. They get to return Jimmy Garoppolo. They get to restructure Matt Stafford. They actually sign Devontae Adams to a 2-year contract. But they let go of Cooper Kupp, who ended up signing with the Seahawks. Here was my thought on that. And all of these guys are older, as far as Devontae, as far as Matt, and as far as Cooper. To me, if they could have potentially worked out a salary or structure deal with all of them, here's what we're going to pay you, Devontae, if you come here. We gave Philly the best run for their money when it came to the playoffs and moving on to the Super Bowl. We feel like we're really close again. We have a lot of young pieces. If they could have kept all 3 of them to be able to make that work, I think this Rams team, between Matt Stafford, Devontae, Cooper, and Puka Nacua, that would have been extremely dangerous to have, and I think they would have been a huge, formidable threat, even more so, all honesty, than what they are right now. I think that they will probably win the NFC West, considering all the other teams have definitely taken a step back. I feel like the Cardinals are still kind of trying to rebuild. The 49ers lost a ton in free agency, and now are just trying to kind of sign, pieces to fit in and maybe retool a little bit. And then obviously Seattle gutted a lot. I don't know if intentionally or not. I know they released wide receiver Tyler Lockett and they traded DK, so I don't know what Seattle's doing. But I feel like the Rams are honestly in the best spot to win the NFC West if things continue on the way that they are. So on top of all they lost, the 49ers do sign quarterback Mac Jones to a 2-year deal. That was one, when he first got drafted, I honestly thought he would probably fit in San Francisco a little bit better, but they took more of a risk with Trey Lance. And so who knows, maybe it works out. Maybe he's able to get his career revitalized a little bit with Kyle Shanahan. And it'll also depend on how Brock Purdy does. Can he stay healthy? Does he get hurt? And if potentially they could move to Mac Jones if something happens, or if they're not able to get a deal done with Brock. It's very, very possible. And then the Seahawks, they a little bit active in free agency aside from trading DK. They do sign quarterback Sam Darnold to a 3-year, $100 million deal with $55 million of that guaranteed. They signed Cooper Kupp to a 3-year, $45 million deal. And they sign wide receiver Marquez Valdez-Scantling to a 1-year deal, and former Cowboys edge rusher DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year, $42 million deal as well. So again, I don't know what Seattle's really going to do. I think with where Sam Darnold was with Minnesota, with Kevin O'Connell, with an above average offensive line, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, that was Sam Darnold's best opportunity as far as succeeding. And he went 14-3, which is great. But they ended up the 5th seed. They go and they face the 11th. They go and they face the Rams, and they get embarrassed when they do. So it was one of those, he didn't perform well in high stress situations. And again, that was kind of his first year in what we would really call a successful and truly positive environment with what he had. He didn't have that in Carolina. He didn't have that in the Jets. He was a backup for San Francisco when, San Francisco was, being San Francisco and rolling through, but he didn't really have to take any snaps. He was just kind of there just in case something happened to Brock. So with him going to Seattle, I think he's going to struggle a little bit. He does still have a wide receiver in Jackson Smith and Jigba. Other than that, I really don't know what else he has other than Kenneth Walker up there offensively. Now, again, he does have Cooper Kupp, which can be solid. He has Marquez. Now, if Marquez can kind of retap into what he used to have, that could potentially be a solid thing, but I don't know if that will truly be the case or not. But appreciate everybody that's tuned in and watched. If you enjoyed and you want to potentially hear more, like I said, as more things come out and whatnot, I will definitely be covering it. Just right now with the off season, there's not a whole lot to talk about as far as football goes, but I promise I will still make episodes and content and whatnot. You can find me pretty much everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I will definitely be posting YouTube a lot more, all at Inside the Hoosier Mind. But if you love everything that is military broadcast radio and all of the great podcasters that we have, like I mentioned with Into the Weeds with Amber and Alora, is absolutely fantastic. You have Money and Finances with Joey Laswell, with the Fire Social Worker. You have so many different podcasts on here with great veterans, with great advice, great content. Please check them out, and please follow them. You can find pretty much everybody at the stuff above there at mbradio.us or just MB Radio. Or if you're watching on any of those platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and whatnot, just to your bottom right, there should be a little QR code that you can scan to learn more. You can find out more about the shows. And if you would potentially like to help donate, anything like that you want to, it all goes to the veterans, everything like that. It's a non-for-profit. You can do that, and it helps someone get, content, helps them learn, helps them get good equipment and whatnot. So please check that out if you're interested. But other than that, I appreciate everybody, and we will be back soon. Everybody have a great night. And hopefully, if you're in the Midwest and you're able to enjoy some warm weather at the current moment before it changes, please do. And we will see y'all later.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us, giving our veterans a voice.